The chamber was silent, but not with respect. It was the kind of silence that came before a species broke. High above the circular floor, beneath a ceiling carved from obsidian crystal that reflected every movement like fractured truth, she stood alone, unarmed, unbowed, and surrounded by those who had once called her their future. Thousands watched from the elevated tiers, generals, scientists, bloodline elders, all waiting for her to kneel. She did not. "State your acceptance," the first voice commanded, its tone devoid of warmth, stripped down to pure authority. "The continuity bond must proceed. The survival of our species requires your compliance." Her claws tightened at her sides, cutting into her palms, though she did not flinch. Pain, at least, was honest. "You ask for compliance," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber, sharp and unyielding. "But what you truly demand is surrender." A ripple moved through the crowd, subtle, uneasy. No one spoke. No one interrupted. Because they all knew what came next. At the center of the chamber, the projection ignited, a rotating figure, human in form, rendered in cold light. No armor. No insignia. Just a name. Subject designation: Daniel Hayes. Compatibility: viable. Purpose: genetic continuity candidate. For a moment, something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Not fear, not anger, but something sharper. Disbelief. "That," she said, her gaze fixed on the projection, her voice lowering into something almost dangerous. "That is your solution." "You misunderstand," the first voice replied. "This is not a solution. It is the only remaining path." A murmur spread, this time less controlled. The word remaining carried weight, and they all felt it. They had all seen the numbers. Declining births. Failing lineages. Warriors who could conquer systems but could no longer create life. Extinction had stopped being a theory. It had become a countdown. Her eyes swept the chamber, searching faces she had fought beside, leaders who had once praised her strength, minds that had shaped entire star systems. Now they watched her like a necessary sacrifice. Not a leader. A resource. "You want me to carry this out," she said slowly, each word measured, deliberate. "To bind myself to a species you have spent centuries calling inferior. Primitive. Weak." "No," the first voice corrected. "We want you to ensure our survival." "And if I refuse?" The silence returned, but this time it was heavier. "You will not refuse," the voice said, "because you understand what is at stake." For a fraction of a second, something flickered across her expression. Not doubt. Not hesitation. Calculation. Then she laughed. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it was wrong. It did not belong in this chamber, in this moment, in the face of extinction. And that made it terrifying. "You still don't see it," she said, shaking her head slowly. "You think this is about survival. You think this is desperation." Her gaze snapped back to the human projection, narrowing. "But this is control." That word hit harder than anything she had said before. Before the first voice could respond, the chamber lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then died. Darkness swallowed everything in an instant, followed by a cascade of alarms that tore through the silence like a blade. "What is happening?" someone shouted. The projection shattered into static. Emergency glyphs ignited across the walls, flashing in rapid succession. Systems failing. Security breaches. Unauthorized access. Then the message appeared. Not on the central display. On every surface. Genetic Vault 7. Compromised. For a moment, no one moved. Then chaos erupted. "That's impossible. Seal the chamber." "Who authorized?" Her heart didn't race. It dropped. Vault 7 wasn't just another storage facility. It was one of the last intact repositories of uncorrupted genetic lines, their future, preserved in silence, now breached. Not failing. Breached. Someone had done this. Deliberately. And in that instant, everything changed. Because extinction was no longer the greatest threat. Someone wanted it to happen. Her eyes moved, not in panic, but with precision, scanning the chamber, the exits, the guards, the shifting power structure unraveling in real time. And then she saw it. A flicker in the dying projection. A fragment that hadn't fully collapsed. A single line of data that should not have been visible. Subject designation, Daniel Hayes status. Active clearance override, pre-authorized. Her breath stilled. Pre-authorized? By who? Before she could think, before she could question, before anyone else could notice. She moved. Not away from the chamber. Toward the truth. Because whatever this human solution really was, it had already begun. And she had just become part of it. By the time the chamber sealed itself, she was already gone. Not vanished, nothing so crude, nothing so careless, but removed with a precision that would have made even the high command uneasy if they had been paying attention. The chaos had given her exactly what she needed, distraction layered over assumption. No one expects the center of the storm to move through it. The corridors beyond the council chamber were alive with motion, armored sentries rushing toward the breach alerts, command officers shouting into comm channels already choking with conflicting data. Orders overlapped, contradicted, dissolved into noise. Systems that had not failed in centuries flickered with hesitation. And she walked through it. Not running. Not hiding. Just moving with the kind of authority that made others step aside without thinking, because hesitation, in moments like this, was more dangerous than certainty. Vault 7 compromised. The words echoed in her mind, not as panic, but as a pattern that didn't fit. Genetic collapse had been slow, measured, frustrating. Years of decline. Decades of diminishing returns. But this was a strike. Targeted. Surgical. Someone hadn't just accelerated extinction. They had announced it. She turned sharply into a restricted corridor, one that should have been sealed already, one that led away from the council sectors and toward the inner archive spires. No guards stopped her. Not because they weren't there, but because they were looking outward, toward threats they understood. They weren't looking for someone who had already realized the real threat was inside. At the end of the corridor, a single door remained intact. No alarms, no flickering systems, just a quiet, stubborn stability that felt almost out of place. Her private command vault. Of course it hadn't failed. Because it wasn't connected. She stepped inside, and the door sealed behind her with a low, final sound that cut her off from the noise of the collapsing order outside. For the first time since the chamber, she allowed herself to breathe. Then she moved. The data shard she had taken, small, easily overlooked in the chaos, slid into the console interface, and the room dimmed as the system activated. Layers of encryption unfolded, resisting, testing, probing for authority. She didn't override them. She let them recognize her. Lineage clearance. Command authority. Strategic access. Accepted. The projection ignited. Fragments at first. Broken sequences. Corrupted logs that flickered and died before forming meaning. But not all of it was damaged. Some of it had been protected. Deliberately. Her eyes narrowed as the system began reconstructing the file, stitching together pieces that had survived whatever attack had breached Vault 7. Genetic matrices. Population viability charts. And then something else. Hidden layers. Not scientific. Not medical. Administrative. Her pulse slowed. That was wrong. She expanded the layer. What unfolded was not a report. It was a directive. Project Continuity Protocol. Tier Omega Authorization. Her jaw tightened slightly. Tier Omega wasn't used for research. It wasn't used for survival contingencies. It was used for control measures that no one was supposed to question. Her gaze moved faster now, scanning lines that grew more unsettling with each second. Selective fertility suppression. Lineage prioritization. Population compliance stabilization. The words were clinical. Clean. Designed to sound like solutions. But she could see what they actually were. Not failure. Design. Her people weren't dying because they couldn't survive. They were being managed. Her hand stilled over the console. That wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Because if it was true, then everything the Council had said, every warning, every projection, every desperate measure, wasn't desperation. It was strategy. A sharp tone cut through the silence. Incoming transmission. Unauthorized. She froze. No one should have been able to reach this system. Not from outside. Not without triggering the entire security grid. And yet the signal pulsed, steady, insistent. Not a request. A connection already established. Her instincts screamed to cut it. To isolate. To lock everything down. But something else held her still. Because the timing was too precise. The breach. The data. And now this. Slowly, deliberately, she accepted the transmission. The projection shifted. The data vanished. Replaced by a single figure. Human. The same one from the chamber projection. Daniel Hayes. But this was not a static image. He was moving. Alive. And looking directly at her. For a fraction of a second, neither of them spoke. Then he exhaled, almost like relief. So, he said, voice calm, steady, as if this were not an impossible connection across restricted systems in the middle of a collapsing empire. You saw it. Her eyes hardened instantly. You're inside our network, she said, each word edged with controlled threat. That should be impossible. Yeah, he replied quietly. A lot of things should be. That wasn't an answer. That was a warning. Her claws flexed slightly, the only outward sign of the shift in her thoughts. Start explaining, she said. He didn't. Instead, he tilted his head just slightly, studying her in a way that was not submissive, not defensive, but assessing. Like he had expected this moment. Like he had been waiting for her specifically. You're already ahead of your counsel, he said. That's good. It means we might actually have time. Time for what? His gaze didn't waver. To stop them before they finish what they started. The room seemed to shrink around her. Finish, she repeated. He nodded once. They didn't just trigger the collapse, he said. They've been building toward it for years. Her mind moved fast, connecting fragments, patterns, contradictions that had never quite aligned. The directives. The suppression. The sudden push for the continuity bond. All of it. No, she said sharply. If that were true, there would be resistance. Someone would have exposed it. Something flickered in his expression then. Not doubt. Something closer to recognition. They did, he said. Her breath caught, just slightly. What happened to them? For the first time, his gaze shifted. Not away. Down. Like he was choosing the exact weight of the next words. They disappeared, he said. Across multiple systems. Same pattern. Same silence. A cold realization began to form, slow and heavy. This isn't just my people, she said. No, he replied. It never was. The implication settled between them, vast and dangerous. A system. A network. Something larger than a single empire. Her fingers tightened into a fist. Why you? She demanded. Why are you involved in this? Another pause. This one longer. More deliberate. Then he looked back up at her, and whatever restraint had been there before was gone. Because, he said quietly, someone used my name to start it. Silence hit harder than any alarm. For a moment, the weight of that statement didn't land. Then it did. Her gaze snapped back to the data console, to the fragment she had seen before the transmission. Subject designation, Daniel Hayes. Clearance override, pre-authorized. Her heart didn't race. It dropped again. And this time, it didn't recover. Because if his identity had been used to authorize something inside her empire's most restricted systems, then he wasn't just connected to this. He was embedded in it. She looked back at him, something new forming behind her eyes. Not just suspicion. Not just anger. Something sharper. You're telling me, she said slowly, that my people are being controlled. Her voice tightened. And somehow, you're the key to it. He didn't deny it. Didn't confirm it either. He just held her gaze, steady, unflinching. I'm telling you, he said, that if we don't figure out why my name is in your system. His next words didn't rise. They didn't need to. Your extinction won't be an accident. The connection flickered. Not from instability. From interruption. Both of them felt it. Someone else had found the signal. His expression changed instantly. "Listen to me," he said, faster now. "They're going to come for you next. Not to force the bond." The transmission glitched. Distorted. His voice cut in and out. "You know too much." The signal surged. Then stabilized just long enough for one final sentence. "Don't trust." Static. Silence. The projection collapsed. The room went dark again. And this time, she didn't need the alarms to tell her what had just happened. Because for the first time since the chamber, she wasn't ahead of the situation anymore. She was already being hunted. And somewhere out there, a human who shouldn't exist inside her empire systems had just tried to warn her about someone she hadn't even considered yet. The silence didn't last. It never did. The moment the transmission collapsed, the room shifted from sanctuary to liability. Systems that had been invisible a second ago came alive in sharp, predatory pulses, security sweeps, signal traces, intrusion flags cascading across the console in rapid succession. Whoever had intercepted that connection wasn't guessing anymore. They knew exactly where to look. She didn't hesitate. The data shard was already in her hand before the first lockdown directive finished cycling. One motion, precise, practiced, and the console wiped itself clean, purging access logs, corrupting residual traces, leaving behind nothing but meaningless static. But she knew better. Nothing was ever truly erased. Only delayed. The door behind her sealed open with a harsh mechanical snap, no longer waiting for authorization. That alone told her everything she needed to know. Command override had been issued at a level equal to, or above, her own. Which meant one thing. This wasn't containment. It was retrieval. She stepped into the corridor just as the first squad rounded the far junction. They didn't slow when they saw her. That was the first anomaly. Elite guard units were trained to defer, even in crisis. Protocol demanded recognition, confirmation, coordination. These soldiers skipped all of it. Weapons up. Target locked. No hesitation. No respect. Just execution. She moved before they fired. The first shot carved through the space where she had been standing, searing heat ripping across the wall behind her. She pivoted low, driving forward instead of retreating, because distance would only give them advantage. Close range was where discipline broke, where instincts replaced commands, where mistakes happened. Her first strike wasn't lethal. It was disruptive. She slammed into the lead soldier's weapon arm, twisting with controlled force until the joint snapped with a muted crack. His grip failed. The weapon dropped. She caught it mid-fall, already turning, already firing. 2 precise bursts. 2 targets down. The rest adjusted instantly, spreading, adapting, far faster than standard units should have. Another anomaly. They weren't just following orders. They were trained for this. For her. That realization sharpened everything. She didn't engage further. Not because she couldn't win, but because that wasn't the objective. Survival wasn't the goal anymore. Understanding was. She broke through the side corridor, forcing the pursuit into narrower paths where their numbers meant less. Every turn she took was deliberate, pulling them deeper into sections of the structure that hadn't fully transitioned into lockdown. Old architecture. Legacy systems. Places the modern command grid didn't fully control. Because if someone had rewritten the rules inside the Empire, then the only safe ground left was where the system couldn't reach. Behind her, the soldiers didn't slow. Didn't call for backup. Didn't even speak. They just followed. Relentless. Efficient. Wrong. She reached the maintenance shaft access and didn't stop, tearing the panel open with one motion and dropping inside before the next volley of fire could pin her. The hatch slammed shut above her, sealing out the immediate threat, but not the problem. Because this wasn't about escaping soldiers. It was about escaping a system that had already adapted. Her descent was controlled, fast, silent, and for the first time since the transmission, she allowed the thoughts to align. They didn't try to detain her. They didn't issue commands. They didn't even attempt communication. They went straight to lethal force. Which meant the human had been right about one thing. She knew too much. But that raised a more dangerous question. How much had he known? She reached the lower junction and paused, listening, not for movement, but for pattern. The hum of the structure, the rhythm of active systems, the subtle distortions that signaled something out of place. A shift. Not behind her. Ahead. Her eyes narrowed. They weren't just chasing. They were cutting her off. Which meant, "They're not reacting," she murmured under her breath. "They're predicting." And if they were predicting her movement, then her actions weren't the variable. She was. A cold realization formed, slow and precise. Someone had modeled her, studied her patterns, her tactics, her decision trees. Not in general. Specifically. That wasn't surveillance. That was preparation. For her. She moved again, faster now, but not randomly. This time, she broke pattern deliberately, choosing paths that contradicted her own instincts, forcing decisions that felt inefficient, even wrong. Within seconds, the system responded. Routes sealed. Barriers shifted. Access denied in corridors that should have been open. She exhaled once, slow. They're learning in real time. Which meant there was only one way forward. She had to become unpredictable. Not tactically. Fundamentally. Her path veered sharply, not toward escape routes, but deeper, toward something she hadn't planned to use. Not yet. The auxiliary transit hub. Old. Disconnected from the primary command network. Barely maintained. But still functional. If she could reach it, she could get off-world before the net fully closed. If the hatch ahead slid open just as she reached it, not because she had access, but because something else had granted it. She stopped instantly. That wasn't right. Slowly, carefully, she stepped through. The hub beyond was dim, powered by emergency reserves, its systems lagging just enough to feel out of sync with the rest of the structure. A single transit vessel rested at the center platform, engines cold, systems dormant. Waiting. Her gaze swept the space. Empty. Too empty. Then the console flickered. Not with system activation. With a signal. External. Her pulse didn't spike. It tightened. She approached slowly, every instinct alert. The interface stabilized. And then it connected. No request. No authorization. Just access. The same signature as before. Her jaw set. "You again," she said quietly. The screen didn't show him this time. Just a data stream. Coordinates. Transit vectors. And a single line of text. "You're running out of time." Her eyes hardened. That's not an explanation. The system paused. Then updated. Neither is death. Her grip tightened on the edge of the console. "Why are you helping me?" A longer pause this time. Long enough to feel deliberate. Then, "Because they think you'll follow the plan." Her gaze sharpened. "And you don't." The response came instantly. "No." That wasn't confidence. That was certainty. Her mind moved fast, aligning fragments, patterns, contradictions. "They modeled me," she said. "They know how I think. How I act." "Yes." "They expect me to run." "Yes." Her eyes narrowed further. "Then this," she gestured to the ship, the route, the escape laid out too cleanly. "This is part of it." A pause. Then it was. Silence filled the space, heavier than before. Then she exhaled slowly. "Good," she said. Another pause. Longer. Uncertain. "Why?" Her gaze lifted, sharp, unyielding. "Because now I know where they want me to go." Her hand moved across the console, not accepting the route. Rewriting it. And for the first time since the transmission, the system hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Behind her, the access doors began to open. They had found her. Of course they had. But this time, she wasn't reacting. She was choosing. The engines of the transit vessel roared to life, systems igniting in controlled sequence as she stepped onto the platform, movements precise, deliberate, already ahead of the closing net. The route she set wasn't safe. Wasn't efficient. Wasn't even logical. It was something else entirely. Something they hadn't planned for. And as the vessel lifted, tearing free from the station just as armed units flooded the hub. One thought settled, cold and clear. If they had built a system designed to control her choices, then the only way to break it was to become someone they had never accounted for. The stars stretched ahead, vast and uncertain. And somewhere within that uncertainty, a human who knew too much, and hadn't told her the most important part yet. The stars did not welcome her. They distorted. The moment her vessel cleared the outer defense perimeter, the jump corridor should have stabilized into a clean, predictable vector. Instead, space itself seemed to hesitate, like a system unsure whether to let her pass. That was new. She adjusted manually, overriding the autopilot before it could correct her course back into whatever invisible boundary it had just brushed against. The navigation grid flickered, recalculating, rejecting, recalculating again. "They're not just tracking," she murmured. "They're shaping routes." Which meant the trap wasn't behind her. It was ahead. Her fingers moved faster across the console, stripping away layers of assistance, turning off predictive mapping, disabling adaptive navigation. Every system designed to help was now a liability. Every algorithm was another voice trying to guide her somewhere she didn't choose. For the first time since she had taken flight, she was flying blind. And for the first time, that felt safer. The vessel shuddered slightly as it exited the unstable corridor, dropping into real space near the outer edge of a contested sector. No official designation marked this region anymore. It had once been a trade hub, a convergence point between species. Now it was quiet. Too quiet. Debris fields drifted where stations used to orbit. Fractured hulls rotated slowly in the void, their transponders long dead. The kind of silence that wasn't natural, but enforced. Her sensors struggled to resolve long-range signatures. Signal interference. Intentional. Which meant she wasn't alone. Her eyes moved across the display, searching for anything that didn't belong, any pattern that broke the stillness. She found it. A faint pulse. Not broadcasting. Listening. Her grip tightened slightly. A relay. Hidden. Passive. Waiting for something specific. For someone specific. She didn't approach it. Instead, she altered course again, pushing deeper into the sector, toward a structure that barely registered on modern charts. An old orbital station. Abandoned by official records. But not erased. Because things that were erased left cleaner data. This was something the system had chosen to forget. The docking ring was dark when she arrived, its surface scarred by impacts that had never been repaired. No automated guidance engaged. No welcome signals. No defensive locks. Just open space. Waiting. She didn't trust it. But she entered anyway. The moment the vessel latched onto the docking clamps, her internal sensors spiked. Power signatures. Minimal. Localized. Someone had been here. Recently. She powered down the vessel, not completely, just enough to mask her presence, and moved toward the hatch. The silence pressed in as it opened, thick and absolute, broken only by the faint hum of aging systems struggling to stay alive. The air inside was stale. Filtered. Maintained. Not abandoned. Her steps were quiet as she moved through the corridor, every instinct tuned to the smallest shift in sound, the slightest change in pressure. The architecture was outdated, built before the current standardization protocols, meaning the internal systems were less predictable. Less controllable. Exactly why she had come. The central chamber was ahead. And she knew it before she saw it. Because the signal she had detected earlier. It wasn't external anymore. It was here. She stepped inside. And stopped. He was already there. Not on a screen. Not as a projection. Real. Daniel Hayes stood near the center of the chamber, one hand resting lightly on a console that had no right to still be functional. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but there was nothing unguarded about him. His eyes were already on her, steady, calculating in a way that didn't feel like hostility, but didn't feel like trust either. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Because this changed everything. "You're far from where they expected you to go," he said finally, his voice calm, as if they hadn't just crossed impossible distances under impossible circumstances. Her gaze didn't shift. "You knew they were predicting my movements," she replied. "You didn't say how far that prediction extended." A slight tilt of his head. "Would you have believed me if I had?"
No.
She wouldn't have. That didn't make it acceptable. "You're here," she said, her voice tightening slightly. "Not through a transmission. Not through a system breach. You're physically here." His expression didn't change.
Yeah.
"That means one of two things," she continued. "Either you've been running from the same system I just escaped." Her eyes sharpened. "Or you were never outside it to begin with." Silence. Not empty. Measured. Then, slowly, he pushed off the console and took a single step closer. Not threatening, not defensive, just enough to shift the space between them. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. Her claws flexed slightly. "Then correct me." Another pause.
Then.
"They don't want you dead," he said. That wasn't what she had expected. Her eyes narrowed. "They tried to kill me." "No," he replied quietly. "They tried to remove variables." A subtle difference. A dangerous one. Her mind moved quickly, replaying the encounter, the speed, the precision, the lack of communication. Not chaotic. Controlled. "They want me contained," she said slowly.
Yes.
"For the continuity bond." Another pause. Longer this time.
Then.
"Partly." The word landed wrong. "Partly," she repeated. His gaze didn't waver. "You saw the directives," he said. "You know this isn't just about reproduction." Her jaw tightened. "Then say it." Something shifted in his expression then. Not hesitation, not fear, but the weight of a truth that couldn't be softened. "They don't need you for survival," he said. "They need you for alignment." The room seemed to close in around her. Alignment with what? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached back toward the console and activated it with a simple touch. The system flickered to life, ancient displays struggling to render modern data. Then the projection ignited. Not her people. Not his. Something else. Multiple species. Multiple systems. All connected by a single network of overlapping directives. Fertility control. Population shaping. Leadership stabilization. It wasn't one empire. It was a pattern. A system built across civilizations. Her breath slowed. "That's not possible," she said. "It is," he replied. "And it's been running longer than either of our histories record." Her gaze snapped back to him. "And you know this how?" This time, he didn't deflect. Didn't redirect. He just looked at her. And answered. "Because I was part of the team that found the first layer of it," he said. Silence hit again. Harder. "And then?" she demanded. His eyes didn't shift. "We got too close." Her pulse dropped. "What happened to your team?" Another pause.
Then.
"They stopped existing." The words weren't dramatic. They didn't need to be. Her mind connected it instantly to what he had said before. Disappearances. Across systems. Same pattern. Same silence. "You're the only one left," she said.
Yes.
"And you're telling me," her voice lowered, tightening with something sharper than anger, "that a system powerful enough to erase entire research teams." Her eyes locked onto his. "Just let you walk away?" For the first time. He didn't answer immediately. And in that hesitation, she saw it. Not fear. Not guilt. Something worse. Recognition. "They didn't let me walk away," he said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Then how are you here?" His gaze held hers. Unflinching. "Because I stopped being someone they needed to erase." A slow, dangerous understanding began to form. "That's not an answer," she said. "No," he agreed. Then, softer. "It's a warning." Before she could press further, the station trembled. Not violently. Precisely. Her instincts flared instantly. "That wasn't structural," she said. "No," he replied. His eyes shifted, not to her, but to the outer sensors. "They found us." Of course they had. But something about his tone. It wasn't surprise. It was expectation. Her gaze sharpened again. You knew this location wasn't safe.
Yes.
Then why bring me here? For a fraction of a second. Silence. Then he looked back at her. Because this was the only place they'd show their hand. The station trembled again. Harder this time. External impact signatures lit up across the console. Not random fire. Targeted strikes. Testing. Probing. Her pulse steadied. Then we don't leave, she said. That wasn't hesitation. That was decision. He studied her for a brief moment. Then nodded. Good. Outside, something moved through the debris field. Not ships. Not exactly. Something larger. Something designed not just to destroy, but to contain. And as the first silhouette emerged from the darkness beyond the station, one thought settled, cold and certain. This wasn't a chase anymore. It was a capture operation. And they had just stepped directly into it. The station did not panic. It adapted. Ancient systems that should have failed under the first external strike instead reconfigured, rerouting power through forgotten conduits, activating defensive layers that had not been used in generations. Panels along the chamber walls shifted, revealing embedded arrays, old, inefficient by modern standards, but independent. Unaffected. Uncontrolled. Exactly why this place still existed. They're not firing to destroy, she said, her eyes tracking the incoming data as it populated across the fractured display. They're mapping the structure. Daniel didn't look surprised. They want the exits, he said. All of them. Another impact rippled through the station, not explosive, but precise, like a pulse scanning through the outer hull. Her sensors struggled to interpret it, the readings inconsistent, fluctuating between physical force and something else. Something deeper. That's not standard weaponry, she said. No, he replied. It's not meant to break the station. His gaze shifted toward the outer field. It's meant to isolate it. The realization hit instantly. They're sealing us in.
Yeah.
For a fraction of a second, silence held between them. Then she moved. Not toward escape routes. Toward the console. Show me everything, she said. He didn't question it. Didn't hesitate. The projection expanded, layers unfolding rapidly, sensor feeds, intercepted signals, partial decryption streams that pulsed with unstable clarity.
And then
it resolved. What surrounded the station wasn't a fleet. Not in the way she understood fleets. There were ships, yes, but they weren't arranged for battle. They were positioned in a lattice, a geometric structure that extended beyond visible range, each vessel acting as a node in something larger. A containment grid. Her breath slowed. That's not just for us, she said. No, Daniel answered quietly. Her eyes narrowed further. They're not reacting to our presence. Her voice dropped. They're executing a protocol. And protocols didn't trigger without authorization. Which meant this had been planned. Who gave the order? She asked. Daniel didn't respond immediately. Instead, he expanded the projection again, isolating specific data threads, pulling out fragments that had been buried beneath the larger structure. Encrypted identifiers. Command signatures. Authorization chains. Her pulse dropped. Because she recognized them. Not all of them. But enough. These are council signatures, she said. Some of them, he corrected. Her gaze snapped toward him. Some. He nodded once. Look deeper. She did. And what she found didn't make sense. Because woven between the council identifiers were others. Human. Not military. Not government. Something else. Private sector designations. Research authority markers. Names she didn't recognize, but structures she did. Decentralized. Distributed. Hidden in plain sight. This isn't just your empire, she said slowly. No, he replied. It's not just my people being controlled.
no.
Her mind moved faster now, connecting fragments, patterns that had been invisible before. Multiple species. Multiple systems. Same directives. Same outcomes. Fertility collapse. Dependency. Controlled solutions. Her claws tightened. This is coordinated.
Yes.
Across civilizations.
Yes.
Silence pressed in again. Then she asked the only question left.
Why? This time.
Daniel didn't answer with words. He reached forward and activated one final layer. The projection shifted, collapsed, reformed into something simpler, cleaner. A timeline. Not of events. Of interventions. Points across history where systems changed. Where policies shifted. Where entire populations altered course. Without knowing why. Her eyes tracked it, faster and faster, until the pattern became undeniable. Every collapse. Every natural decline. Every desperate measure taken by leaders who believed they were acting alone. Connected. Guided. Steered. Her breath stilled. This isn't survival management, she said.
No.
This is control.
Yes.
But for what purpose? She demanded. His gaze met hers. Steady. Unyielding. To standardize outcomes. The words didn't land immediately. Then they did. And when they did, they hit harder than anything else. Standardize, she repeated slowly. Her mind filled in the rest before he could say it. Populations. Leadership. Reproduction. Civilizations. Everything reduced to predictable variables. Everything shaped into something manageable. Her voice dropped. That's not governance.
No.
That's not survival.
No.
Her eyes sharpened into something dangerous. That's ownership. This time, he didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because she was already there. The realization settled, cold and absolute. Her people weren't being saved. They were being engineered. And not just them. Everyone. Every species caught in the network. Every civilization that had ever believed its struggles were its own. None of it had been isolated. None of it had been accidental. It had all been guided. For something larger. Something that required control at a scale no single empire could achieve alone. Her pulse steadied into something sharper. Something focused. And the continuity bond, she said slowly, that's not about preserving my species.
No.
It's about anchoring control.
Yes.
Through bloodlines.
Yes.
The pattern locked into place. Leadership structures tied to controlled reproduction. Genetic pathways that ensured compliance. Future generations shaped before they were even born. Her jaw tightened. They're building something, she said. Daniel's gaze didn't shift. They already have. Another impact struck the station, harder this time. Closer. The outer lattice tightened, the containment field beginning to stabilize into its final form. Time was running out. But the question remained. The most important one. Who, she said, her voice cutting through the tension, is actually in control of it? For the first time since they had met. Daniel hesitated. Not long. But enough. And that was all she needed to know. You don't know, she said. His jaw tightened slightly. Not exactly. Not exactly. Not no. Not impossible. Just incomplete. That's not good enough, she said. No, he agreed. Another tremor ran through the station. Closer now. The grid was locking. Whatever came next. There would be no easy escape. Her mind moved fast, recalculating everything she thought she understood. The system. The control. The false extinction. The manipulated solutions.
And then
a new thought formed. Sharp. Dangerous. If they've been standardizing outcomes, she said slowly, then they've been predicting behavior.
Yes.
Her eyes narrowed. Not just populations.
No.
Individuals. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. Because she already knew. Her gaze locked onto him. And you, she said, her voice dropping into something colder, more precise, you're the variable they couldn't standardize. Silence.
Then, yes.
The word didn't carry pride. It carried weight. And that's why you're still alive, she said. Another pause.
Then, yes.
Her mind clicked again. Fast. Precise. relentless. And that's why they used your identity, she continued. Because if they couldn't control you. Her eyes sharpened further. They could use you. Daniel didn't respond. But this time, the silence confirmed it. Everything shifted again. Not just the system. Not just the enemy. Him. Because if his identity had been used to authorize something at the highest level of her empire's control structure, then he wasn't just connected to this. He was embedded in it at a level even he didn't fully understand. Her voice lowered. How deep does it go? Another tremor hit the station. Stronger. The outer hull beginning to strain. The containment grid locking into its final configuration. There wasn't much time left. But his answer came anyway. I don't know yet, he said. Not yet. That word mattered, because it meant one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. Outside, the lattice completed its formation. The station shuddered, then stilled. And in that unnatural stillness, a new signal appeared on the console. Not from the grid. Not from the system. Something else. Unknown. Unregistered. Watching. Her pulse didn't rise. It focused. Because after everything she had just learned, there was only one possibility left. They're not the top layer, she said. Daniel's gaze shifted to the signal. Then back to her. No, he said quietly. The next words didn't need volume. They never were. And as the unknown signal began to resolve into something neither of them recognized, one final realization settled in. The system they had been fighting, the one controlling civilizations, the one shaping extinction itself, might just be the middle layer of something far worse. And whatever was above it had just started paying attention. The signal did not announce itself. It didn't broadcast identity, origin, or intent. It simply existed, threaded through the containment lattice like it had always been there, like it belonged to a layer neither the station nor the surrounding grid could fully perceive. And yet both reacted to it. The outer lattice, perfect, calculated, absolute in its geometry, shifted. Not visibly, not structurally, but in behavior. For the first time since it had formed, it hesitated. Daniel saw it instantly. They didn't expect this, he said, his voice lower now, tighter. Her eyes never left the display. Neither did you.
No.
That mattered. Because up until now, he had been one step ahead of everything else. Not controlling it, not mastering it, but understanding it faster than anyone else could. This was outside that understanding. The signal pulsed again. And this time, it wasn't just data. It was a command. Not directed at them. Directed at the grid. A simple sequence. Short. Efficient. And impossible to misinterpret. Reprioritize. The lattice responded. Ships that had been fixed in perfect formation adjusted their alignment, micro-shifting into new positions that tightened the containment field not around the station, but around something else. Something just beyond it. Her gaze sharpened. They're not locking us in anymore. Daniel's expression darkened slightly.
No.
They're locking something else out. The implication hit before the words could. Which meant, whatever had just entered the system wasn't part of the control network. And the control network was afraid of it. The station trembled again, but not from external strikes this time. The internal systems surged, ancient conduits struggling to reroute power as the environmental field fluctuated. Pressure. Not physical. Conceptual. Like space itself was being told to behave differently, and didn't fully agree. Her instincts flared. This isn't stable. No, Daniel said. It's not supposed to be. Her eyes snapped toward him. Explain. He didn't look at her immediately. He was watching the signal. Tracking it. Trying to understand something that didn't follow the rules he had spent years learning.
Then,
it's not just outside the system, he said slowly. It's above it. Her pulse steadied. Above, as in higher authority. A slight shake of his head.
no.
That answer was worse. Then what? Another pulse. Stronger this time. The display flickered, struggling to render something it wasn't designed to process. Daniel exhaled once, controlled. "It's not authority," he said. Her eyes narrowed. "Then say it." He did. "It's infrastructure." The word landed heavier than it should have, because it meant something simple, something terrifying. Everything they had been fighting, the lattice, the directives, the genetic control, the manipulation of entire civilizations, wasn't the system. It was a subsystem, built on top of something else. Something older. Something deeper. Her mind moved fast, recalibrating everything. "If that's true," she said, "then this entire network is built on borrowed space," he finished. Another pulse. Closer now. The station lights dimmed for half a second, then surged back, flickering as if struggling to maintain consistency. And then something changed. Not in the data. Not in the systems. In her. A pressure built at the edge of perception, not physical, not mental, but something in between. Like standing too close to a massive structure you couldn't fully see, only feel. Her breath slowed. "What is that?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer. Because he was feeling it too. The signal shifted again. And this time, it reached. Not toward the station. Not toward the grid. Toward them.
No.
Toward him. Daniel stiffened slightly, just enough for her to notice. "What is it doing?" she demanded. His jaw tightened. "I don't know." But that wasn't entirely true. She could see it. In the way his posture changed. In the way his focus narrowed. In the way his breathing adjusted, controlled, deliberate. He wasn't just observing it. He was reacting to it. "It's interacting with you," she said. "No," he replied quickly. Too quickly. Her eyes sharpened. That wasn't a denial. Another pulse. Stronger. The systems flickered again, and this time the display didn't just glitch. It rewrote. For a fraction of a second, the projection shifted away from the lattice, away from the signal, and displayed something else. A profile. His profile. Not the one she had seen before. Something deeper. Layered. Complex. Fragments of data she didn't understand, interwoven with markers that didn't belong to any system she recognized. Then it was gone. Replaced by static. But she had seen enough. Her voice dropped. "What are you?" Silence. Not empty. Heavy. Then he looked at her. And for the first time since they had met, there was no deflection. No redirection. Just truth. "I don't fully know," he said. Her pulse didn't spike. It sharpened. "That's not acceptable." "I know." Another tremor ran through the station. Harder now. The outer lattice tightening further, reacting to the signal's continued presence. Whatever was happening, it was escalating. And fast. Her mind moved again, faster than before, connecting the last pieces. "They used your identity," she said. "They embedded it into the system. High-level authorization. Access beyond standard control structures." "Yes." "They couldn't standardize you." "Yes." "They couldn't erase you." A pause. Then, "No." Her eyes locked onto his. "Because you're part of what they're built on." Silence. Then, "Yes." The word settled like a final piece clicking into place. He wasn't just a variable. He wasn't just an anomaly. He was connected to the layer beneath the system. Not by design. Not intentionally. But fundamentally. And whatever had just entered the field, whatever that signal was, it recognized him. Which meant, it recognized what he was. Her voice lowered, steady, precise. "You're not just outside their control." He didn't respond. Didn't need to. "You're outside their design." Another pulse. Closer. Stronger. The station lights dimmed again, this time holding just a fraction longer before stabilizing. And then, the signal changed. Not in intensity. In intent. The display resolved again, but this time, it didn't show the lattice. It didn't show the station. It showed a path. A route. Not away. Not outward. Down. Beneath. into something the station wasn't mapped to contain. Her eyes narrowed. That's not an escape vector. No, Daniel said quietly. It's leading somewhere. Yes. She looked at him. Do you know where? A pause. Then, no. Another tremor. Stronger. The outer hull began to strain, the containment grid pushing harder, reacting faster, trying to stabilize against something it couldn't fully process. Time was gone. Options were collapsing. And the only path left was the one neither of them understood. Her gaze returned to the display. Then to him. You said they were trying to contain variables. Yes. Her voice sharpened. Then whatever this is. She gestured toward the signal, the path, the unknown layer beneath everything. It's something they can't contain. Yes. A breath. Steady. Controlled. Then. Good. That wasn't relief. That was decision. She turned toward the lower access corridor, the one that hadn't appeared on any map, the one that shouldn't exist, the one the system had just revealed. Behind her, Daniel hesitated for the first time. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. Once we go down there, he said, we're not coming back the same. She didn't stop. Didn't slow. That was already true. Another tremor. The station beginning to fail under the strain. The lattice tightening. The signal pulsing stronger. Calling. Not demanding. Not forcing. Just waiting. She reached the threshold. Paused. Just long enough to say one thing. If this is the layer they built everything on. Her voice dropped into something colder. More certain. Then it's time we see what they were so afraid of. And without waiting for another answer, she stepped into the dark, where the system ended, and something far older began. The dark was not empty. It only pretended to be. The moment she crossed the threshold, the station behind her seemed to recede. Not physically, not in distance, but in relevance. The noise of failing systems, the pressure of the containment lattice, even the rhythm of her own breathing, all of it dulled, as if something deeper had decided it was no longer important. Daniel followed one step behind, and the instant he entered, everything changed. The corridor sealed. Not with sound. With absence. Light didn't shut off. It was removed. And yet she could still see. Not clearly. Not in defined edges or colors. But in impressions, shapes that existed because something allowed them to exist. The passage stretched downward, but not in a straight line, not in any geometry her mind could comfortably process. It was wrong. Not hostile. Just uninterested in being understood. This isn't part of the station, she said quietly. No, Daniel replied, his voice lower now, more controlled. The station was built around it. That realization settled with weight. Not discovered. Buried. Her instincts, sharpened through war and command, told her to retreat, to reassess, to gather information before committing further. But that instinct, for the first time in her life, felt small. Because whatever this was, it didn't care about preparation. It didn't care about strategy. It had been here before her species learned to fight. Before her empire learned to lie. Before the system learned to control. And now, it was aware of them. The path shifted beneath her feet. Not moving. Rearranging. Subtly. Like the space itself was adjusting to accommodate them. Not guiding, not trapping, just acknowledging. Daniel stopped. She didn't. What is it? She asked without turning. His answer came slower than usual. Measured. Careful. It's not scanning us, he said. Her eyes narrowed. Then what is it doing? A pause. Then, it's recognizing. That word didn't belong here. Recognition implied identity, memory, connection, and nothing about this place should have had any of those things. Her steps slowed, not from fear, from calculation. If it recognizes you, she said, then you've been here before. No, he answered immediately. Too immediately. Her gaze sharpened. That wasn't certainty. Another shift in the space. Closer now. Tighter. The path narrowing into something more defined, Not a corridor, not a tunnel, but a direction that no longer needed interpretation. It was leading them somewhere. And for the first time, it felt intentional. Daniel moved forward again, his focus no longer on the environment, but inward. She could see it, the subtle change in posture, the tightening of his awareness. Not defensive. Not reactive. Something else. Like he was trying to remember something he had never been told. "This isn't random," he said quietly. "It's structured." She almost laughed. "This," she gestured to the impossible geometry, the shifting space, the absence of anything resembling logic. "You call this structure?"
Yes.
His voice didn't waver. "It's just not built for us." That answer settled deeper than she expected, because it meant something simple, something dangerous. They weren't exploring this place. They were inside something that had never been meant for them to understand. The path opened. Suddenly, without transition. One step they were moving through confined distortion. The next, they were standing in something vast. Not a chamber. Not a room. A space. Boundless. But contained. Her breath slowed, not from control, but because the air itself felt different. Thinner, not in density, but in meaning. Like it carried less weight, less resistance. At the center, something waited. Not an object. Not a being. A presence. It didn't move. Didn't shift. Didn't react.
And yet,
everything about the space bent around it. Her instincts screamed now. Not to run. To understand. Because this was the source. Not of the system. Of the layer beneath it. The foundation everything else had been built on. She took a step forward. Daniel didn't stop her. Didn't warn her. Because he was already moving too. Drawn. Not by force. By something deeper. The moment they crossed the invisible threshold, the space reacted. Not violently. Not aggressively. But undeniably. The presence focused. Not on her. On him. Her pulse sharpened instantly. Of course it would. "You feel that?" she asked.
yes.
His voice was tighter now. Not afraid. Strained. Like something inside him was being pulled into alignment with something outside him. The presence didn't speak. Didn't project. But something changed. Information. Not in words. Not in images. In understanding. Her mind resisted it at first, rejecting patterns that didn't follow logic, concepts that didn't align with anything she had ever learned. But some of it forced its way through. Not all at once. Fragments. Pieces. Enough to see the shape of it. And the shape was wrong. Not because it was alien. Because it was familiar. Too familiar. "They didn't build the system," she said slowly. Daniel's head tilted slightly, like he was hearing the same thing.
No.
"They found this." Her voice tightened. "And built on top of it."
Yes.
The realization hit harder than anything before it. Everything they had fought. Everything they had uncovered. The control. The manipulation. The false extinction. It wasn't the origin. It was exploitation. Her gaze snapped toward the presence. "What are you?" she demanded. For a moment, nothing.
Then,
it responded. Not with sound. Not with language. With clarity. And the clarity was devastating. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a system. It wasn't even technology in the way she understood it. It was a framework. A structure that allowed reality to be influenced. Adjusted. Not controlled completely. But guided. Shaped. Her breath caught. "This is how they do it," she said. "The population control. The predictive modeling. The standardization." Daniel's voice was quieter now. "They're not just calculating outcomes." Her eyes widened slightly. "They're enforcing them." Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Because that meant every choice. Every decision. Every path her people had taken might never have been entirely their own. Her claws tightened at her sides. "No," she said, sharper now. No, that's not possible. But even as she said it, she knew, because she could feel it. The way the space responded, the way the presence observed. Not dictating, but accommodating. Like reality itself had been given a preferred direction. And something, or someone, had learned how to use it. Her gaze snapped back to Daniel. "And you," she said, her voice cutting through the silence, "you're connected to this." He didn't deny it, didn't confirm it, but the presence focused harder on him. And suddenly, he staggered, not from impact, from overload. Her instincts kicked instantly. She moved, catching him before he fell, her grip firm, steady. "Stay with me," she said. His eyes weren't unfocused. They were too focused, locked onto something she couldn't see. His voice strained. "I can see it." Her pulse spiked. "See what?" He didn't answer immediately. When he did, it changed everything. "All of it," he said. Her breath stopped. "The system?" "No." His gaze snapped to hers. Not confused. Not uncertain. Certain. "The outcomes." Silence. "Then what?" His grip tightened slightly, his voice steadier now despite the strain. "They're not just predicting behavior," he said. "They're narrowing it, compressing probability until only certain paths remain." Her mind reeled. "That's not prediction," she said. "No. That's control." "Yes." Another shift in the space. Stronger now. The presence reacting. Not to her. To him. And then it pushed. Not physically. Not violently. But with intent. And for the first time, Daniel resisted. Not instinctively. Deliberately. His posture straightened. His breathing stabilized. And something changed. Not in the space. In him. The pressure broke. Not completely. But enough. Enough for him to stand. To look at the presence. And not just be observed. But respond. Her eyes widened slightly. "You're not just connected to it," she said. He didn't look at her. Didn't need to. "You can interact with it." Another pulse. Stronger. The space tightening again. The presence. Responding. And this time, not passively. Actively. The realization hit her with absolute clarity. "This is why they couldn't standardize you," she said. "Yes." "This is why they couldn't erase you." "Yes." Her voice dropped. "This is why they're afraid." Silence. "Then, yes." Another shift. More violent now. The space reacting to the change. The system above. Responding. The lattice. The containment. Everything tightening. Because whatever was happening here, it wasn't supposed to. And for the first time, they weren't just uncovering the truth. They were interfering with it. Her grip tightened on his arm. "What happens if you push back?" she asked. A pause. "Then, I don't know." That wasn't uncertainty. That was risk. Her eyes hardened. "Then find out." The space pulsed again. The presence focused completely on him now. Waiting. Not forcing. Allowing. And above them, the system prepared to respond. Because whatever came next would break something. The only question was, what? The space held its breath. Not literally, there was no air here in any meaningful sense, but the effect was undeniable. The vast, impossible expanse tightened around a single moment, a single decision that had never existed before. Because no one had ever pushed back. Not here. Not against this. Daniel stood at the center of something older than every empire, every war, every lie that had shaped the galaxy, and for the first time he wasn't being observed. He was choosing. Her grip on his arm tightened slightly, not to restrain him, but to anchor him. Because she could feel it now too, the pressure building, not from the presence, but from above. The system. The lattice. The artificial order that had been layered over this foundation for generations. It was reacting. Preparing. "If you hesitate," she said, her voice low but unshaken, "they will take that from you too." He didn't look at her, but he heard her, and something in him aligned, not with the presence, not with the system, but with himself. For so long, everything about him had been defined by what he didn't understand. The anomalies, the gaps, the way systems bent around him instead of controlling him.
No.
For the first time, it made sense. They've been narrowing outcomes, he said, his voice steady now, grounded. Compressing possibility until choice becomes illusion. The presence didn't react, but the space did. Subtle, almost imperceptible, like something listening. They didn't create this, he continued. They found it, learned how to use it, learned how to shape probability instead of forcing it. Her eyes never left him. And now, she asked, a breath, controlled.
Then,
now we break that. The moment he reached out, everything changed. Not violently, not explosively, but fundamentally. There was no energy surge, no visible force, no dramatic rupture, just expansion. The space unfolded, not outward, everywhere. The pressure vanished, the weight lifted, the invisible narrowing of paths, the subtle constraints that had guided decisions, shaped outcomes, compressed reality into predictable lines. Shattered, not destroyed, released. Her breath caught, not from fear, but from something she had never felt before. Possibility.
raw.
Unfiltered, uncontrolled. The presence didn't resist, didn't retaliate. It simply allowed it, because that had always been its nature. It didn't enforce. It didn't decide. It only provided the framework.
And now,
that framework was no longer being used against them. Above them, the system broke. Not in silence, in chaos. The containment lattice, once perfect in its geometry, began to fracture, not physically, but logically. Ships lost alignment. Command chains collapsed under conflicting directives. Predictive systems fed into themselves, unable to reconcile a reality that no longer followed expected paths. For the first time, it failed, not because it was weaker, but because it had lost control. Her people's empire, the Allied systems, every civilization tied into the network, all of them felt it. The shift, the sudden, disorienting absence of invisible constraints they had never known existed. And panic followed, because control had always felt like stability. And without it, everything was uncertain. Her grip on Daniel loosened slightly as she stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the presence. "You could have stopped this," she said. "At any point." No response. But she understood now. It had never been its role. Control had been imposed, not inherent. Her jaw tightened. They turned survival into obedience. Silence. They turned choice into illusion. The space remained still. But she could feel it. Agreement wasn't the right word. Acknowledgement. She turned back to Daniel. He was different now. Not transformed. Not changed into something else. But clearer. Like the uncertainty that had followed him his entire life had finally been replaced with direction. "You didn't destroy it," she said.
No.
"You freed it."
Yes.
That mattered. Because destruction would have been easy. Final. But this was harder. This meant responsibility. Above them, the last fragments of the containment lattice collapsed completely, ships drifting out of formation, systems failing to reassert control. Not destroyed. Just uncoordinated. And without coordination. Without enforced alignment. They were nothing more than separate forces again. No longer a single, controlled structure. The system wasn't gone. But it was broken. And it would never function the same way again. Her mind moved quickly, already seeing the consequences. Empires would fracture. Alliances would strain. Leaders who had relied on invisible control would lose it overnight. Chaos would follow. War, possibly. But also, something else. Choice. Real choice. She exhaled slowly. "This isn't over," she said. "No," Daniel agreed. "It's just beginning."
Yes.
Her gaze hardened, not with fear, but with resolve. Then we don't stop here. He looked at her then. Fully. Not as a variable. Not as a target. As an equal. We won't. For a moment, the space around them stabilized, the presence receding, not gone, but no longer focused. Its role complete. Its function restored. Not as a tool, but as a possibility. She turned away from it. Not because it didn't matter, but because she understood it now. And understanding it meant she no longer needed to stand before it. The path behind them reformed, not the same as before, but open. Unrestricted. Her people were waiting. Not for salvation. For leadership. But not the kind they had known. Not control. Not dominance. Something else. She stepped forward. Daniel beside her. Not behind. Not ahead. Together. Because whatever came next, it wouldn't be shaped by hidden systems, or enforced outcomes, or controlled futures. It would be shaped by those willing to face uncertainty, and choose anyway. And as they left the space beneath everything, one final truth settled, quiet but absolute. Humanity had never been the strongest species. Not in raw power. Not in numbers. Not in dominance. But they had something else. Something no system could standardize. No control structure could compress. No outcome could fully predict. They adapted. They questioned. They refused to accept limits that didn't make sense. And when faced with a reality designed to guide them, they didn't just survive it. They rewrote it.
And now,
So would everyone else.